this was given a topmost priority. There are a few technical issues which have got to be followed when such desilting is done. Let us now study why is desilting required. That is because the tank would have lost certain live storage. Live storage means the storage above the sluice level. So, the bed of the tank above the sluice level got silted up to the extent of 5 feet or 10 feet, and therefore, there is lesser storage in such tanks. When there is lesser storage, we would like to restore the storage back to its original position, and in order to do that, we have to remove the silt to increase the live storage. If that is the case, then all the desiltation will have to be done above the live storage, that is above the sill level of the sluice. In many cases, we find desiltation being done in the dead storage area, that is below the level of sluice. The silt desilting, that is excavation of silt, is being done in several cases. This would increase the dead storage level. Will that be useful for the crops? No, because it is a level lower than the sill level of the sluice. So, this increased storage in the dead storage would not be of any use to the crops. It will not add to the storage. But then some farmers want excavation only in the dead storage area, because the silt available there is highly fertile clay, and that clay only they want for the purpose of fertilizing their rain-fed lands. If it is to be done in the live storage area, there will be more of silt and coarse material like fine sand and things like that. The farmers do not prefer that. Now, a situation arises now in the plea of desilting, we are increasing the dead storage area in such a scenario. If the farmers want the clayey soils very close to the tank bund and they want to excavate in the dead storage area, they can do out of their own, at their own cost, and convey it of course at their own cost. So, there is no need for spending the funds under the government programs for such desiltation. But then another angle is being projected. A desiltation done below the dead storage level would be useful for increasing the recharge to groundwater. Therefore, it is not a waste, even though it may not be useful for taking to the crops, for irrigating the crops, but still it would increase the percolation rate, it would increase the recharge to water table. Now, here there seems to be a sort of a dichotomy. In a minor irrigation tank, we always ensure and see that we store the water effectively for purpose of surface water irrigation. We do not encourage loss of water and increase the loss of water through deep percolation. If it is intended as a percolation tank, that is a different thing. It will be all right to increase the deep percolation by such desilting. But if it were to be a minor irrigation tank, it is going against the principle of conserving the stored water for irrigation purposes. It has to be used for irrigation purposes, not for percolation purposes. And if it has to be for purpose of increasing deep percolation, there are methods for that. It is not the way how the pits are excavated. We can have a trench, and then that trench can be with a low cost, and it could increase the deep percolation much more effectively than the desiltation work that is being done in the dead storage area. So, that portion of it we will deal with explaining the next diagram. Now, there is an understanding from the villagers that any dead storage desiltation would also benefit the farmers for having water during the summer period, and also it would be useful for pisciculture. So therefore, even though it may not add to irrigation water, the water that is there below the sill level of the sluice would still be useful for the animals for drinking, will be useful for pisciculture, would also be useful for deep percolation. So therefore, there is a tendency among the farmers to prefer such excavation in the dead storage areas. If that be the case, it has to be done according to a program. It cannot be one pit here, one pit there, one pit there, like that. It has to be planned according to the requirement of the end use. It could be a circular pit with adequate depth in order to see that the evaporation losses are minimized, in order to see that greater quantity of water would be there throughout the summer period. So to minimize the evaporation losses, the depth has got to be increased and it has got to be made with lesser surface area. That means it could be a circular section and with a greater depth. It should not be like pit here, pit there and all things like that, which will again increase the evaporation during summer and the water will not be available throughout the summer period. So the purposes and end uses, when they are of this type, it has to be oriented towards that one, and it serves a purpose. Certainly then it can be classified as a work pertaining to pisciculture or providing water for animals, and it could still be done that manner in a technically designed, in a correctly designed manner. Then there are a few versions about the recharge. The minor irrigation tank, if it is silted even to a depth of 5 feet or even 10 feet, some of the tanks which were constructed a few centuries back, they got silted up to 10 to 15 feet depth. And even in such silted tanks, when the tank receives half storage, we find in the command area of the tank the wells having adequate groundwater in spite of siltation. Many people think that a silted tank will not permit deep percolation and recharge to water table, and therefore there should be a device to increase the recharge. It is not required at all. If you see any one of the tanks executed in the 15th and 17th century, they are all working now, and when the tank is half full, we find the wells in the command area having adequate groundwater, and some of the wells even having groundwater up to ground level. So deep percolation takes place even in the case of silted tanks. That is because of the phenomenon called sedimentation transport. In this phenomenon, the silt material carried by the stream is deposited at various points according to the sedimentation transport theory, and in practice it works out like this. The coarser material like sand, fine sand, will get deposited in the upper reaches of the tank, in a wide area in the upper reaches of the tank, and in the middle reaches of the tank it is silt that gets deposited, that is coarser than clay, and the region very close to the tank bund, there the clay particles get deposited. So the method of sedimentation is impermeable strata very close to the tank bund and medium permeable strata at a distance away from the tank bund and highly permeable strata at the farther distance from the tank bund. So even if the tank gets half full of water, the middle and the upper areas where the water is stored will permit for deep percolation, and that is the reason why we have groundwater in the command area even in spite of a heavy siltation occurring in the tank. Now let us see, in the case of percolation tanks, if it is silted up, if they are silted up during the past 10-20 years, these percolation tanks were constructed in large numbers, or some of the minor irrigation tanks are converted to percolation tanks, and this is being done in the case of small tanks in various Rayalaseema and Telangana districts. So in such cases, the manner in which deep percolation has got to be increased, let us study how economically it can be done. This is the ground level and original ground level, and this is the full tank level, and the revetment is like this, and this is the downstream side of the tank. The water storage is on this side, and it got silted up to this level, let us say. One way of increasing the recharge in this percolation tank is to remove the silt which is close to the tank bund section, because this silt will be mostly clay. That could be removed, but that's an expensive item of work to remove the entire silt content. Instead of that, we can achieve the same deep percolation and seepage by means of a trench excavated like this. The details of this trench are given in the guidelines approved and given by the Chief Engineer Minor Irrigation of Andhra Pradesh in 1986, and the diagram and details are there in that. To explain it briefly, this is just a trench with a stable slope, could be half to 1 or 1 to 1 depending upon the type of soil, and it can be excavated up to h by 2. Supposing h is the height of the bund, and supposing this is about 6 meters, height of the bund is 6 meters, then we can excavate up to 3 meters depth, not more than that. If the height of the bund is 10 meters, we can excavate up to 5 meter depth, h by 2. And when we excavate this trench like this, the bottom portion as well as the sides are available for percolation down here and seepage here. So the stored water here, when the water is stored here in the tank, the seepage is predominant through such a trench. This trench is excavated parallel to the bund at a particular distance, and that distance is usually 5 times h, which means suppose the height is 6 meters, this trench will be at a distance of 30 meters, 30, 5 into 6, and not closer than that. And this will be parallel to the bund, all along the bund. And a small trench like this would be having a greater percolation rate, because harder soils will be there and coarser soils will be there at the bottom and the sides. The excavated earth from such a trench can be dumped onto the tank bund to restore the TBL or to have a flatter slope on the downstream side, not on the upstream side but on the downstream side. Many of the tanks may need also some improvement in the bund section by way of raising the top level or having a flatter slope on the downstream side. So this earth will be useful for the purpose of strengthening the bund, and it should be used only for that purpose. It should not be deposited here. There is no need to fill this with any rubble or metal or any such thing, because in some cases I have seen people doing the filling of the trench with rubble. There is no need at all. It does not increase the deep percolation. On the other hand, it is costly to get rubble and then dump it here. Supposing it gets silted up, this also would get silted up over a period of another 10 years or 20 years, it may get silted up. Even in spite of siltation occurring at the bed at the bottom, still the seepage occurs on the sides. So this seepage water would ultimately recharge the water table. If the siltation here is more than 50% of the depth, then we have to remove such silt and deposit again onto the bund and restore it to the old section. So this is a simple device, low cost work, which increases the deep percolation in a silted up percolation tank.